Welcome to the show where we break down the mental health stigma, navigate sobriety with humor, and prove that it's okay to laugh while you heal. Let's get real, let's get honest, and maybe a little weird. Growth is messy, but you don't have to do it alone. This is Sober Psychology. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 8. This is Sober Psychology. I am your host, Michael C., and today we're going to be talking about something that affects a lot of us. We're going to be talking about the dad wound. This is a term that has gained a lot of traction over the past few years. It's not an official psychological term, but it is something that affects a lot of us. So what I want to do today is dive into what does it really mean? What the heck does the dad wound mean? How does it shape our relationships? How does it shape our self-worth, our worldview? And then most importantly, how can we heal from it? So over the next 40 minutes, we're going to be breaking it all down. We're going to be sharing stories and provide tools for anyone who feels the echoes of this wound in their lives. So buckle up, strap in, let's lock in and do this. As always, love your feedback. Bring it to me. Come on. I need it. It'll be real good. But I'm going to jump right in. So what is the dad wound? First things first, the dad wound is a psychological term used to describe the emotional pain and unmet needs stemming from a strained, absent, or unhealthy relationship with a father figure. So again, the dad wound is a psychological term used to describe the emotional pain and unmet needs stemming from a strained, absent, or unhealthy relationship with a father figure. This doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's dad was abusive. You don't have to have an abusive father in order to have a dad wound. This can also just mean that a father was neglectful. It can sometimes the wound comes from emotional unavailability when a father is physically present but emotionally absent. And then other times it stems from the rigid expectations or criticism or even societal norms that box fathers into roles that they struggle to fulfill. We talked about this in episode 3, I believe, the setting expectations episode, where expectations are predetermined resentments. But we also talked about healthy expectations. As a kid growing up, your expectation that your parents will provide for you and care for you and keep you safe, that's a healthy expectation. That's a reasonable thing to expect from someone who chose to bring you into this world. However, there are other expectations that we tend to dole out for father figures that make it really difficult and really impossible. At the end of the day, one of the difficult things that kids go through is when you no longer have your parents on that pedestal. We all go through it where we think that our dad is Superman, our mom is Superwoman, they can do no wrong. And then you get a little bit older and you start to realize, man, they're screw ups because they're human beings. And that's just the reality of the situation. But there is a lot of difficulty in how we view the parents, and especially the father figure. Society has told dads that they're supposed to provide, we're the hunter kind of, we're going to go out and make the kill and then bring the food home. We're going to provide, we're going to protect. And that is reasonable. That's an ancestral, that's, wired in our DNA, but also there are expectations that we will oftentimes put on our fathers where we expect them to be perfect. We expect them to be flawless, and dads have a hard time filling those shoes. So that gives you an idea. We're not just sitting here talking about how we're the victim of poor parenting. It's also difficult for the father figure as well. So again, I'm going to keep trying to stick to my notes. I had a lot of people reach out to me and ask to start putting more into the show notes, and I appreciate that feedback. That helps me out a lot. So I broke this down for everybody. We're going to follow along with it. So bear with me, folks. Think of the dad wound as like a ripple effect. The impact of that father-child dynamic, it's going to extend far beyond childhood. It can affect how we see ourselves, how we connect with others, and even how we parent the next generation. I think a lot of us have the idea of the father wound, as we'll put it in, dulled down psychological or societal terms, as like daddy issues. I know a lot of men talk about this with girls, especially. Typically, the girls that are out hoeing around and they're jumping from guy to guy, they have daddy issues. And although part of that is true, I think there's a lot more that encompasses the idea of the dad wound. If you look at statistically for men, it's very difficult to not grow up with a healthy father figure. And I think the US Census Bureau, if I'm not mistaken, please fact check me on this, but I think 1 in 4 children in America grow up without a father in the household. Now that does awful, awful things for boys and girls to not have a father figure. But also men in society struggle a lot with the emotional side of things. We can be there from a physical stance. We can just be present. We can fix things if they break in the house. We can protect if someone's trying to break in through the front door. We can be the disciplinarian. But men have a hard time showing emotion because, as you'll learn as we talk about a little bit later on in this, society tends to reject men who show their raw emotion. That vulnerability that is so necessary from men is oftentimes looked down on, especially me. I grew up in the South, and that Southern culture, you pretty much know your role, right? Especially as a man. Your job is to provide, your job is to protect, and that's pretty much it. You go to work, you put food on the table, you keep a roof over everybody's head, and then you don't have to really do anything else. Now, I don't fully agree with it. I do agree with those aspects being something that men take on as their role. However, a lot changes over time too. And there are going to be seasons in your life. Like for me, I've been honest with you guys right now. There's a season in my life where I'm trying to finish up my schooling. And so, work wise, I've taken a step back. My wife is the breadwinner. She also is carrying our child. She's about to give birth in 2 days to our first child. And it's difficult because I'm not going out there and being the one to work. But we've also had that conversation where we're wanting to shift and break the generational curse. I said this the other day when I was talking to her. I've accepted the fact that generational health is much greater than generational wealth. That used to always be my driving point. I just want to go out and work and bust my ass and make enough money to where my kids don't have to work. My kids don't have to worry. And that probably comes from a need from me, I guess. I grew up middle class, and even though my mom, once my parents got divorced, they've been through a lot of financial struggles. I never wanted for anything. We always had everything we needed. But in my mind, I think that's my value as a man, is what I bring to the table financially. I'm so much more than that. And my wife has seen that in our relationship. I'm not one of these closed off men who put up a wall. I've learned to break through that and be open and vulnerable. But I'm also the kind of person that if you bust through my front door, you best believe I'm the first one you're going to meet. I may win, I may lose, but we're going to learn something that day. Um, but I also provide in other ways than just financial. I've been called, as a Christian man, I've been called to be a leader of the household. And so this is tough. Like, all of this is just kind of talking to keep it in mind. But this is how the dad wound shows up in our lives. Okay, going back through it. Number one, oh, we're not going back through it. We're going to talk about it now. But how the dad wound shows up in our lives. Number one, difficulty in trusting authority. Which, hello, I've had a hard time with this, but difficulty in trusting authority. If your father figure was unpredictable or overly critical, you might struggle to trust authority figures. This can affect work relationships or partnerships where you feel a power imbalance. And we're going to see how that works. It's really a stemmed, just the trust issue all around is what is tough with the dad wound. But difficulty in trusting authority. Number two, people pleasing or overachieving. Many people with a dad wound grow up seeking validation. They need to prove themselves, and that can lead to perfectionism, overachievement, or bending over backwards to please others. Again, that's another thing I've struggled with my whole life. I am hardcore perfectionist. It has to be right. It has to be done. I also go above and beyond. I can't just do a small project. It has to be a million things that make it perfect. and then bending over backwards to please other people. I've gone through a huge stage in my life where I focused so much on how people viewed me, and I wanted to be the yes man. I wanted to make everyone happy with me. And that honestly comes from not only my relationship with both of my parents, but especially my dad wound, because the relationship I had with my dad, he was an abusive alcoholic. He wasn't present. The only times that I got any type of connection with him is when I did exactly what he wanted, how he wanted me to do it, when he wanted me to do it. I had to become who he wanted me to be, because as you know, that's what happens with toxic parents is they see you as an extension of themselves. They want to create you to be miniature versions of themselves when in reality they don't even like who they are. So then they don't like you. And that's a cycle we'll talk about. Number 3, fear of rejection. If a father's love felt conditional, you might carry a deep fear of rejection into adulthood, avoiding intimacy or vulnerability to protect yourself. How many of you men especially struggle with this? Women too, but I know from talking from a male's perspective, I have a constant fear of rejection. And so I put up these really thick walls and these really thick barriers, and I don't let people through. And this really got difficult when I was courting my now wife. It was tough because this is the first relationship I've been in where I've been fully vulnerable. I've been fully honest, and I just kind of put everything out there. But there were so many times where that tendency to wall up, because I'm used to being vulnerable and then that being rejected, right? Because my dad can't connect with you emotionally. My mom can't, for that matter, either. But that fear of rejection is something that keeps a barrier from us being able to unlock the full potential of a relationship. Number 4, difficulty with boundaries. Without a strong, healthy father figure to model boundaries, some may struggle to assert their own needs, leading to codependent or toxic relationships. And if that's you, can I get a hallelujah? Because I'm here too. I'm right there with you. Without a strong or healthy father figure to model boundaries. Now, my dad is a womanizer. My dad is someone who needs to seek attention and validation from everybody else, but he especially finds that in the comfort of women. And he cheated on my mom multiple times. He was never really a good example even after the divorce. He bounced around. He's had 3 wives now. He maybe 4, I don't know. But I think there's a lot of that's difficult because us men, us boys, we need models. There are a lot of strong women out there where the father leaves the picture and the women raise the boys. But the ones that I've seen the most success in is when the mothers raise the children, but they have other healthy male role models in the picture. For me, I was lucky. My dad was not a good example, but I had an incredible grandfather who basically raised me. I have an uncle who is incredible as well, and that's where the humor came from. That's where my fun aspect in life came from. So I had a lot of good role models. Then you have coaches, and then you have mentors as you grow up. But without a strong and healthy father figure to model boundaries, some may struggle to assert their own needs, leading to codependent, toxic relationships. How often do we get bitter and mad at our spouses or our significant others because they're not meeting our needs, yet we don't tell them what our needs are? This is something I made very clear with my wife while we were dating. I need 2 things from you. I need to feel safe and I need to feel wanted. Those are the 2 things that I need in a relationship with a woman. When it's someone of significance, someone that I'm looking to marry, someone that I am married to, I need to feel safe in the sense that I can express myself in a healthy way and it's not going to be rejected. And my wife is incredible at this now. We've worked on this and this has been an ongoing process. Because, like, going back up to, I guess, number 2 and 3, really, her dad was emotionally unavailable. So she's more of a people pleaser kind of thing. She won't say what she really wants because it's all about what everybody else needs just to make them happy. And that's a typical response for the dad wound, especially from women. And that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. Like, you could oftentimes put all your needs aside all the time and you never get your needs met, or you can be one of those girls that, the daddy issue girls, where you think that the only way to a man's heart is to give them exactly what they want, which is typically sex. And that's that dark spiral that women nowadays, especially, in the late teens, 20s, that college, high school age, where you think that that's the only way that you're going to be able to be vulnerable with a guy. Because if you think about it, especially, maybe any of my female viewers out there, at the end of the day, you want that vulnerability and openness in a relationship where you can communicate without any barriers, right? But men are so bad at it. We're so bad because we've been taught that if we're vulnerable, we get rejected. And so what do you do to break down those walls? What women have done for a long, long time. You use the mystique, you use the desire, you use the sexuality of what you are, because men have always been attracted to that. And this becomes a very difficult cycle, because then your relationship is predicated and built upon you sacrificing yourself physically in order to get just a little bit of emotional affection from a man. And men too, if your only way of connecting with your wife physically is having sex, the only time that you touch her, the only time that you stroke her hair, the only time that you kiss her is when you want sex, that's an issue. That's a problem. And that's where you've created this bubble where that's the only time that you feel safe being vulnerable. And that's not okay. Men, it's a huge challenge, and I think that it's starting to shift. I'm grateful that I'm seeing it shift too, but men are starting to become more vulnerable and open, and women are having to learn to adjust to that, right? It's difficult because we have to do this in a healthy way. But number 5, repeating cycles. And here's the hard truth. Buckle up with me here. Without addressing the dad wound, many of us unconsciously recreate the same dynamics in our own relationships or parenting styles. And this is with the generational curses thing. I've talked about this a lot because as an alcoholic whose father is an alcoholic, who has a ton of brothers and that side of the family, all alcoholics, all abusive, all cheaters. Like, it's just crazy how it has been a generational curse for a long time. I'm now charged with being sober, staying sober, breaking a generational curse. I've already done exactly what my dad did. I repeated the cycle. I became exactly what he was. All the things that I hated about him, I became that. And now, breaking that cycle, the only way I was able to do that was address that dad wound. And we talked about it in the last episode with resentments. I carried resentment around for my dad for a long time, and it ate me up. It tore me apart. But addressing that dad wound allows you to be able to break free of that. So again, how does the dad wound manifest? Difficulty in trusting authority, people pleasing or overachieving, fear of rejection, difficulty with boundaries, and repeating cycles. So what is the cultural layer aspect of all of this? We can't also ignore the cultural layer of the dad wound. Across the world, masculinity has been narrowly defined for centuries. Fathers as providers, protectors, disciplinarians. Emotions, vulnerability. For many men, those were seen as weakness. And that's what we were just talking about. We've got the providers and protectors and disciplinarians down. That's an easy one to figure out because naturally men have more of a booming voice. We're larger physically than females. We, typically can bring about this intimidating presence more so than what a mother figure could. And so we get all that down, right? And it allows us to beat our chest and act like we're tough and whatnot. However, what about the emotional and vulnerable side of you? How much do you think your kids need to see that? How do you help them with conflict resolution? If every time something doesn't go your way, you cuss and scream, throw something against the wall, throw a fit, what does that teach your boy? If every time your wife says something that you don't like and you mouth off to her and snap back at her and say things that are just awful and your kids see that, what does that teach you? For the men, for the males, it teaches them that that's how I get what I want. And I just control and I dominate. For the women, it teaches them I got to put all my stuff aside and I can never say what I want to say. And I think that's part of where the oppression came from for women and the whole movement of feminism, which I'm not even going to get into, but I think that there are patterns in society of men not breaking cycles. They're repeating the cycles of their fathers. Men are just as screwed up as women. We're all just as screwed up as one another. But the patterns and cycles of men have been, I'm going to go to war. I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to serve my country. I'm going to put a roof over your head and food on the table. I expect you to have sex with me when I want. I expect you to be emotionally available when I need you to be. I expect you to say the right things. I expect you to look a certain way. Okay, so did you just want to have a clone of what you wanted? Did you want to just create this perfect image and that's just what you expected? Or did you love this person because of who they are? This is difficult too. Like my wife, I mean, I'm real bad about the potential. Like I see a lot of potential in people, and that's one of the reasons I'm wanting to go into psychology is because I want to help people to push themselves to the brink of what they didn't even know existed. Everybody has the capacity for more, right? And I'm saying that to myself too. Um, which again, that's what me going back to school is, right? Like it'd be a lot easier for me just to go and get a job and nestle into a 20, 30-year career doing the exact same thing, making money, buying what I want when I want. Or I can get to a point where I know that I'm going to push myself in order to be a servant. That was one of my goals and one of my dreams, and that's what I'm doing. But for women have a hard time in society, especially. We don't consider this enough, but think about how many women have to put their careers and their dreams and their goals on pause or put them away altogether and change because they have kids. And that's something that I've known a lot of women to want. They want children. There's this natural desire because that's what you're created for. But then we just disregard this sometimes. And we want you to be exactly who we want you to be when we want you to be that. That's exactly how my dad treated me. And probably his dad treated him. And if you're listening to this and you've gotten this far into it, chances are your dad probably treated you that way on some level as well. So why do we continue to do that? It's refusing to break the cycle. But being open and vulnerable, that's what your kids need to see. That's what other people need to see. As someone who's a Christian man, I am, this is taken out of context so much, but wives, submit to your husbands. Are you a husband who's worthy of being submitted to? Are you someone who is actually worthy of being respected in your household? When your kids screw up, which they inevitably will, is the first thing that they say is, oh my gosh, my dad's going to kill me? Or do they say, I better call my dad? Which one do you want to be? Again, I think this is all shifting and it's starting to change. And I can't speak much from the father aspect because I'm not a dad yet. Give me 2 more days and I'll be a dad. But there's a lot of this breaking down the stigma, breaking down the barriers and the walls. It's okay to be emotional. It's okay to have emotion. How are you reacting to that though? These expectations don't just hurt fathers, they hurt children too. If a dad feels that he can't express love or admit failure, that emotional wall gets passed down to the next generation. In cultures where shame or saving face is a priority, the dad wound might feel even more unspoken but deeply felt. How often do we hear, well, that's just how dads are? So it's time to change that narrative. We can't just continue to say, well, it's just what a dad's supposed to be. No, you're supposed to be emotionally available. You're a living, breathing human being. You have a heartbeat. You have blood moving through your veins, flesh and blood. You do not want your kids to be cold and calculated. I do not want my kid to grow up thinking that it's okay to yell at women. And I have a history of violence. I have a history of domestic abuse. And fortunately, being sober now, that seems so far removed from who I am now, but still, my actions, if I'm out in the garage and I'm working on something and my kid is out there just wanting to be involved and just wanting to be a part of it, and I'm doing woodworking and I make the wrong cut or something goes wrong with one of the tools I'm using, and instead of laughing about it or figuring out a way to solve it, I just get mad and throw something across the garage, who do you think's going to do that next? That's what my kid just saw. And just like we talked about at the beginning, he's already put me on a pedestal. Maybe I can't fill those shoes. I don't know. Maybe I can. But the last thing I want to do is make him think that that's an okay way to act. Because it's not. It really isn't. So here's the big one. How do we heal the dad wound? How do we get to a point where we accept that this is real? We accept that we are hurting. We accept that we have been hurt. How do we break the cycle? How do we heal from this? These are going to be 6 quick steps that you're going to hear over and over again from other psychologists. You're going to hear from a lot of different angles and worded differently, whatever the case may be. Again, I'm just speaking from my experience and what I know I did to work through this. The dad wound is going to inevitably leave a scar. That's just what it is. And you can whine about it. You can bitch and moan all you want. Or you can accept the fact that, like we talked about in the last episode, like Carl Jung was saying, in order to gain that wisdom, you got to walk through the fires of hell. This is an opportunity for you. You've walked through the fires of hell. Now let's go. Let's gain that wisdom from it. Let's get better from this. But this scar that you have doesn't have to define you. I did this for over a decade. I let these scars define me. And as the wise poet Papa Roach once said, the scars remind us that the past is real. Write that one down. That's an important one. But the past is real. We went through it. We experienced it. What are you going to do with it now? You're going to whine and complain about it and then pass that down to your children, the next generation, so then they can do the same thing to their kids? Or do you buck up, do what, in my opinion, takes more gumption, takes more testicular fortitude as far as being a man is concerned, and do you break the cycle? Do you become the healthy, loving father? That's where this opportunity is. So number one, we can recognize the patterns. Healing starts with awareness. Reflect on how your relationship with your father might be influencing your thoughts and actions right now, today, in this moment. A good tool for this is like journaling. And I know that a lot of men are going to think, oh, that's just so feminine. Get over yourself. Get over yourself. I started journaling a lot because I realized that that's a healthy outlet for me, is writing. I have a journal that I started with for my son before he's even born. I started this, 6 months before he was born, and I'm writing a journal entry in it consistently. And when he turns 18, I'm going to give it to him, and that's a way for him to see my heart. I'm vulnerable in that journal. I'm able to just push the world out, and I'm able to sit down and write and just pour out what I'm feeling and thinking. And I want him to see that one day, because there may come a time in the near future where I wall up again and he sees a version of me that I don't want him to see. And I want him to be able to go back and look at this and say, this is my dad's heart. This is the way my dad actually felt and thought. Now, I hope I can show him that without having to journal, but I'm just saying journaling is a great way, some type of creative outlet. Record little videos on your phone. Just sitting in your truck. If you're going from job site to job site, or if you're on a lunch break, or you're at the office, or whatever it is that you may be, go sit out in the back, have a cigar, sit down and just do a minute and a half video. Just talk through it, right? Act like you're talking to an audience about your experience. This is something that can help you start to be very aware and recognize the patterns, right? Number two, reframe your narrative. Your dad's shortcomings aren't a reflection of your worth. Hear me say it again, please. Your dad's shortcomings are not a reflection of your worth. Please hear me say that. Remind yourself that you're enough just as you are. And I'm not going to sit here and say the same catchy lines that are written on cursive on the shiplap signs that you can get at like Michael's or Target or something like that. You're worth it, man. You're valuable. All of you are. Anybody who's listening to this, you have value. And you're not defined by your actions of your past. You're defined by who you choose to be now, how you choose to treat other people. What are you bringing into the world? More chaos and pain? Or are you finding a way to heal, right? So your dad's shortcomings aren't a reflection of your worth. Number three, you can seek professional support. This is therapy, especially modalities like inner child work or cognitive behavioral therapy. These can help you process and reframe your experiences. For me, this happened in rehab when I was going through my fourth step, where it was all this inventory. And then my fifth step, when I was talking about it and I was having people hold me highly accountable and tell me their perspective. I've also done counseling over this. This is something that's very important because it's tough to navigate. Sure, you could recognize it and you can start to pay attention to it, but sometimes it gets so overwhelming we don't know how to handle it. There's absolutely no shame in seeking mental health at all. Cognitive behavioral therapy is very, very important for everybody, every single person, unless one of you viewers is listening and you're perfect, which you're not, so go get help. Number four, set boundaries. This is only if this is applicable, but set boundaries. Again, if you go watch the previous episode, you'll see that I recently had to do this with my mom, especially. I've already done it with my dad. Now I had to do it with my mom. And these are very important for your own personal growth. If your dad is still in your life but continues to hurt you, it's okay to set boundaries. Healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Okay, that's very important. Healing does not always mean reconciliation. I think that you have to reconcile with yourself. But like, for instance, my dad, I've tried multiple times in my adult life to have a relationship with my dad. He's not a healthy human being. He still drinks. He still sees me more as a drinking buddy than he does as a son. He's not a good example for what a man should be. And that's very apparent in the way that he treats other people. And so for me, now that I've had the opportunity to get back on my feet and get sober and start my own family, he's not allowed into this. Which is the same way with my mom. You're not allowed into this if you're going to bring chaos. You can be healthy and be involved, but you're not going to be unhealthy and be involved. Number 5, practice self-parenting. Sometimes the father figure we need is the one that we create for ourselves. Practicing nurturing self-talk, encouragement, and unconditional love for your inner child. Now, I hate these little terms, your inner child and whatnot, but it is a huge psychological term. It is something that's very important. If you are in a situation where you're struggling with your self-image because of the relationship that you have with your dad and what you've experienced from that dad wound, it's very important to get to a point where you're communicating with yourself in a healthy way. For me, this is a lot of how I dig into the Bible, to my relationship with God, and constantly asking God to help me see myself the way that He sees me. And it's difficult. It's not a one-time deal. It's a constant process. It's working a muscle. I don't go out and have one workout and expect to have the physical goals already met. I'm going to keep going back to that grindstone. I'm going to keep sharpening the axe. I'm going to keep on chopping the wood, and I'm going to keep on building and building and building. It's a constant work in progress. You're not the same person that you are now. The person that you are now is not the same person you'll be in 5 years, in 10 years. People change. Your mentality changes. Your emotions and hormones change. So keep working. Number 6, and this is the last point for how we heal, community and connection. Healing does not happen in isolation. Please hear me say that. Healing does not happen in isolation. Share your story with trusted friends and support groups. You're not in this alone. That's the whole premise of this podcast. You're not in this alone. I'm gonna recover out loud so fewer people have to suffer in silence. And a lot of times it's not just with my addiction. That's also with me as a human being and the human condition. I carry a lot of past trauma. I carry a lot of past experiences that other people are currently going through now. And if me sharing my story can somehow or another help someone, or someone who's already been through it can see it from a different perspective and help me, what better way to work through that than to have a community? Reach out go to these Facebook groups, go find therapy. If you have a significant other, start reforming and rechanging or change the relationship that you have there to be an open, healthy, boundaryless relationship. My wife knows everything about me. I mean, if I died today, you could come and talk to her and she will tell you everything I was struggling with. And that's just honest and open communication. And we work through that. We work on that. And that's a hard thing for me to do because I have trust issues from all of this. So again, how do we heal from the dad wound? You recognize the patterns, you reframe your narrative, you seek professional support, you set boundaries if applicable, you practice self-parenting, and then community and connection. So these are all important things to get over the dad wound. You're not alone. A lot of people struggle with this. A lot of people suffer with the dad wound. We've been hurt by repeated cycles. Men who chose not to break the cycle and instead either were abusive or neglective, or dads who were emotionally unavailable. Either way, the dad wound is created from that. And you are not a bad person for having experienced the results of that. You're not a bad person for having struggled with it. You're not a bad person for having a hard time navigating what this all looks like. Again, I'm here. I'm not a licensed therapist, but I am a studying, practicing student of psychology, and am focusing on getting my license, focusing on being able to help in a professional manner. But I've been through a lot, and I can talk to you human to human. So please reach out. If you don't feel comfortable reaching out to me, that's fine. Find someone you can talk to. Just find someone who can help you, and trust the fact that whatever you choose to believe, whether it be that God put that person in your life and He's going to guide you through that person, whatever it is, just accept the fact that you're going to get through it and it's okay. You're not going to get through it if you quit, though. Promise you that. So, as always, guys and gals, keep your head up, keep your heart open, go help somebody. We'll catch you next time.